Welcome everyone to the second episode of the Stylewithden show. This really is an incredible moment for so many reasons. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, phone calls, arranging, putting everything together to create this moment for you. But when you're actually in it and living it, it's overwhelming and it's exciting. And I cannot believe, literally pinch me, I have a wonderful, wonderful star here for you today. Telly Leung.
Hi.
Not only is he Broadway's Aladdin, on his 7th Broadway show, owning this city like it's his job. He's a dear friend. And I really am overwhelmed when I reached out to him to be part of the show. Without hesitation, he said yes. He had so many excuses, valid excuses to say, no, I'm good. Okay, it's Monday, I have one day off, I need to rest the voce, the chords, we're tired, 8 shows a week, I'm singing like a crazy person. And he said, no, tell me when, where, how, open, and he's here. So I had to just get that out because it's so exciting, and it really warms my heart that people, when they hit a certain level of success, still stay open and remain true to their friendship. So I had to throw that all out there to start.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet of you to say thank you.
You're welcome. It's the truth.
Well, you know, we went to college together,
yes.
Which I know some of your viewers may or may not know, but you know, when those 4 years at Carnegie Mellon University,
yes.
You know, it's not an easy program.
No.
And there's this bond that develops when you're there with those people, you know, finding yourself as a human being and finding yourself as an artist, and you do it with the small group of people that are all kind of in the same place artistically and personally, and you stay close to them. And you know, Dennis and I haven't seen each other in years, but when Dennis called, it was like no time had passed.
It's honestly, we picked up right where we left off.
It's great. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So good to have you. I mean, it's interesting when you mention Carnegie Mellon, and I have to think of my first impression of you, or the first moment that I knew who you were. He was a couple years younger than me, so we graduated about 7 or 8 years ago. That's me spreading rumors. I remember we had this Voice Lab.
Oh yeah. Woo!
That was a big deal.
So
right?
Voice Lab, once a week, everybody in the entire program, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, we all got together 1 hour every Thursday to sing for each other.
Yes.
And, you know, as a freshman, it was, super intimidating to see upperclassmen who had been trained for, 3 years get up there and do it. And then I remember being in Voice Lab and being like, wow, I want to like sing like Dennis one day, or I want to like get up there and have that kind of confidence.
We had that on tape right there. We had that moment.
Yeah,
Broadway's Aladdin just said that.
Because Dennis was the upperclassman that, our whole class looked up to. We looked up to your class so much, and we aspired to be that confident when we got up there to sing, because we were very scared. The first Voice Lab.
And the thing is, it was probably the most intimidating room you could ever imagine yourself being in, singing in front of your peers. And there's certain things where going to a college like Carnegie Mellon can hone your skills and push you and certainly create a really well-polished performer, but there's something that you're born with, that you have.
Oh.
I remember that impression of you just getting up there and singing, and there was a confidence already instilled there. It's like, this is where this young guy is meant to be, and it's pretty incredible to watch throughout the course of his career, this man. So I just remember my first impression of meeting Telly and actually seeing him perform in this Voice Lab class, and he had guts, and this kid had moxie, and he knew, and he's not somebody who can sing, he can sing. And that's what I love. He's got soul, he's got it all, and so none of his accomplishments are a surprise to myself or anyone that's had the privilege of knowing him. But we have him here, and so we want to ask some questions and dig in a little bit deeper past that surface layer and find out more about Telly. So welcome.
Thank you. So it's interesting that you say that, because like performing and singing and dancing is something I know how to do well,
yes.
But actually dressing myself is something that I don't know how to do well at all. Because I'm so used to, being in the theater,
yes.
I'm so used to, you're in comfortable clothes, you're
yes.
always in dance clothes or rehearsal clothes, and then, when you're in a Broadway show, you have wonderful Tony Award-winning designers like Greg Barnes dressing you all the time. So
I work with Greg as well. Yeah. He is phenomenal. That man is a genius.
He's amazing.
Yes.
So I don't really think about the clothes I wear.
Yes.
So today it's been an absolute blast, actually, getting styled Hi, Dennis. It's so fun. It's been a blast.
Well, it was amazing. In the second exchange, after Telly had told me that he would do the show, he said, "I admittedly do not have a huge fashion sense, so please, I am your subject." And this is one of the looks that we actually came up with today. And I think he looks fabulous.
Thank you.
I'm sure you can tell by the photo shoots and as well that he looks fantastic.
And the cool thing is, I would never think to put all of these things together. You know, I know Dennis and I were talking about color.
Yes.
And you know, I'm a born and raised New Yorker.
Yes.
And New York can be sometimes a dirty, grimy city. So I'm always scared to wear white. And you know what I mean, things like that might get dirty easily. So, but I think after today I'll be a little more courageous.
And that is really my mantra in terms of dressing and just in life in general, particularly when I was performing as well, was to push out of your comfort zone a little bit. Sometimes we do kind of get stuck in a rhythm, and so I want your clothes to be an extension of that and to take some risks. Throw some color in,
Yeah.
and I think he looks fabulous. We threw
So
a little
fun.
bit of pink here. We have our Lorenzo Umo shirt,
Yeah.
and he really is working it. So we wanted to zhuzh him up a little bit.
Thank you. I need the zhuzhing.
Amazing. All right, so one of my features that I always do on the show here is I have to go through the Wikipedia page.
Oh gosh.
Oh, and look, we just have it conveniently pulled. All right. Fantastic headshot, by the way. So going through here, you said you were born and raised in New York.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about when was that first moment that you had that spark that you knew you wanted to be a performer?
Well, the crazy thing is, so I grew up with immigrant parents, right? Both my parents, you know, they came to New York City in the 1970s, and you know, they came with $200 and a couple of suitcases, and they crashed with friends on friends' couches in Chinatown, in Mott Street, you know. So, and my dad started working in the restaurant business. He went from being a dishwasher to eventually, years down the line, he'd have his own restaurant and he'd manage restaurants. My mom started working in the sweatshops of Chinatown. And you know, where most Chinese women in Chinatown are in the garment industry, actually. Mom, you know, didn't even know how to sew. She started working at the garment factory, learned how to sew, and eventually, you know, she would work during the day and took herself to night school. And she learned pattern making, all of that. Now, eventually, Mom has managed her own garment factory. She has had her own business, and she's worked with everybody. She's worked with Badgley Mishka, Anne Klein, Ellen Tracy, Isaac Mizrahi. Now she's working on The Row with the Olsen twins. You know, and now the people in the fashion industry now just call her. They go, "Hey, we need Judy."
Okay,
You know?
Judy and I need to talk.
Yeah,
first of all, okay.
Judy's amazing.
I think Judy has a Stylewithden moment.
And she
happening
actually,
in
that
the
might be the
future,
next.
very
That
soon.
might be the next guest.
You saw it happening right here.
Judy Leung.
Oh,
but
amazing.
she really is trained on site, you know,
Yes.
just by being in this business for now 30, 40 years. And but you know, they, as blue collar immigrant parents, they knew nothing about the theater. So I did not grow up with stage parents. You know, this was kind of being an actor was the last thing my parents wanted me to be. You know, they wanted me to go to Harvard and become a doctor or a lawyer and be a very good student and, you know, afford all the things that they couldn't afford as kind of blue collar New York City middle class parents. So you know, theater was not something they exposed me to. They didn't even know what Broadway was. I mean, I grew up in New York City, only a subway ride away from Broadway, and I didn't even know what it was. They also were so adamant on me being a good student. So, you know, I kind of had tiger parents. I had a tiger mom. And so she didn't allow me to watch, you know, what she called junk cartoon after school. No cartoons. You couldn't watch cartoons. The only thing they would let me watch was PBS, because it was educational, it was good for you.
Yes.
You know, so I watched a lot of Sesame Street and Square One and 3-2-1 Contact and nature shows. Well, one day on PBS was Great Performances. And it was the first time I ever saw a Broadway musical. It was the original company of Into the Woods that was shot live at the Martin Beck Theater. You know, Joanna Gleason, Bernadette Peters, Chip Zien, that whole company, they shot it live and at 8 years old, I saw my first musical on TV. And I think that was the moment that
was
I
it.
was That was it. I didn't even know that was Broadway. I didn't know that was theater. I just knew that I was sucked in by what was happening on that screen, you know?
When was the first time you realized that you had this voice, you had a gift?
I think I always grew up singing. You know, oddly enough, my parents, when they came to this country, didn't speak much English.
Mm-hmm.
So they learned how to speak English by watching a lot of popular American TV, which is why I'm named Telly, actually. I'm named Telly after Telly Savalas, who was a very famous 70s actor on the hit show Kojak.
Yes, yes.
And my dad listened to a lot of popular American music in the 70s, so it was a lot of Saturday Night Fever and Donna Summer and Simon and Garfunkel and Beatles and Casey and the Sunshine Band. It was like, that was kind of what was playing in my house, records. That was kind of how they Americanized. So music was always in the house, and I would always be singing along to these records that my dad had. So that's really how singing started for me, was really trying to sound like those singers that my dad grew up listening to.
Unbelievable. Now, was there a moment where you sang for the first time in front of an audience that it just really lit the match? I mean, what was that moment where you had somebody outside of the living room that really responded?
I think it was my 4th grade. In the 4th grade, we were doing songs from Mary Poppins.
Oh.
And I got the solo in the 4th grade. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And they were like, oh, you can carry a tune, you can really sing. And growing up Cantonese, I grew up bilingual. So Cantonese is quite a resonant dialect.
Yes, that is true.
I have no trouble being heard in English or Cantonese. So that forward resonance helped me. They're like, wow, he's loud and he sings on pitch. Great. Like,
perfect. Sign him up. He's in.
So that was the first time that I really got attention for being a good singer.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of when I got bit by the bug, probably. 4th grade.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I think it was similar for me. It was around 4th and 5th grade, and for me, I did my first show. Did actually Shakespearean show, and it was, I know, Midsummer Night's Dream, and then the teacher, she had rewritten it, and I was a hot mess. There's this picture where I think I am all that, I am in my robe, and I had these horrific red sweatpants underneath, just giving you face, but it was lit, and the spark was there. So you went there, and then we went to Carnegie Mellon after that, and then I do want to go to your relationship with a mentor. I know you have a couple of them, but Billy Porter is somebody that I know has been a big part of your life.
Billy was also a Carnegie Mellon alumni.
Yes.
And when he graduated in '91, his first Broadway show was the original company of Miss Saigon. And Miss Saigon was such a wonderful show.
Miss Saigon is why I am in music theater to this day. It's just overwhelming what an impact that show had on me.
Miss Saigon really in the '90s was the beginning of, it was really a training ground for all of these Asian actors on Broadway. There was a very small community of people, just because there weren't that many opportunities for Asian people on Broadway. I mean, before Miss Saigon, there was Pacific Overtures.
Yes.
A short-lived show called Shogun, Flower Drum Song. You know what I mean? So maybe a couple of King and I's that were on Broadway. So I mean, unfortunately, like the Asian opportunities on Broadway, I can list them on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't that many. So when Miss Saigon came along, Billy met this kind of tight-knit, small family of Asian Broadway actors. And there was a gentleman there called Mark Oka, who was the dance captain of Miss Saigon back in '91. Now, Billy graduated Carnegie in '91 and he went right into a Broadway show. Well, here I was graduating the class of 2002. Billy came back and was directing my senior thesis production of Company. And he cast me to play Bobby in Company. Now, that upcoming fall on Broadway was going to be the Broadway revival of Flower Drum Song on Broadway. And Billy called up his old friend Mark Oka from the original company of Miss Saigon and said, listen, there's this kid that I'm directing right now at Carnegie Mellon University. He has no agent, he has no anything, but I think he's really right for the revival of Flower Drum Song on Broadway. Would you see him? And Mark said, well, yeah, we have an audition coming up next week. It's for people that have only been in a Broadway show, who have agents who submitted them, but we'll totally see him based on your phone call, absolutely, if you really think he's that good. So Billy Porter was like, great. He was like, I got you an audition for Flower Drum Song in New York City next week. He's like, however, you're playing Bobby in Company, in my production of Company, and Bobby is in every single scene of this play. So you have to do tech till midnight. You can't miss tech. Then you have to get on a bus, a Greyhound bus, from Pittsburgh to New York City, which got me to New York by like 9 in the morning. I splashed some water in my face, at a bathroom at Ripley Greer Studios, and then I changed into my dance clothes and I was right into my first Broadway audition. And I was there surrounded by all of these people who had done Miss Saigon and done King and I, and they were all performers that had agents and had been on Broadway before. And here I was, literally fresh off the bus.
And no, fresh off, and then he books the show. Okay, let me tell you, I wish my story worked out that way. I remember getting one of my first auditions, and I was in LA. I took the red eye, was in the middle of a 3-aisle plane, couldn't sleep, pounded a Red Bull. It was for West Side Story on Broadway. Went in, pounded the Red Bull, did a double pencil turn, and got cut. Thanks for the memories. Back on the plane. No, I just had to throw that out.
But I have to say, this was before, cell phones, before all of this.
Yes.
So I after I did my audition, which was all day long, I got back on the bus and I went back to Carnegie Mellon to take class and to go back to tech, rehearsals with Billy Porter. And, I didn't really know how I did, but in that 12-hour bus ride, in that time that I went back to Carnegie, Billy had already gotten a phone call, basically saying, nothing's official, but we love him and we think he's gonna be in the Broadway revival.
Unbelievable.
So I went up to Billy and I told Billy how the audition went, and Billy was like, well, I think it went pretty well. I got a phone call about you already. And I was like, well, that's good. I was like, Billy, I don't know, if I get this job, I know that as the third dancing chorus boy on the left in Flower Drum Song, I'm only gonna get 25 words in my playbill, but I promise you, four of those words will be thank you, Billy Porter.
Oh.
And if you go to my first playbill on Broadway in Flower Drum Song, the last 4 words in my playbill are thank you, Billy Porter, because had it not been for somebody like Billy, having the faith in me and putting his own name and his own neck on the line for me, and saying, all right, do me proud, kid, go to New York and do me proud. I wouldn't be here today. Do you know what I mean? I think we all have those teachers and those people in our lives that say, no, you can do it. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. And that's what pushes us forward.
Unbelievable. Billy Porter, he was so wonderful. I remember when I was graduating Carnegie Mellon, and he came out and saw us in the LA leagues that we had auditions. Just positivity.
Yeah.
Just bringing that to somebody, and just that little extra encouragement. And like you said, somebody believing in you can make all the difference in the world. But this kid clearly was destined for great things.
And I later on, I remembered, as I was in this business longer and longer, and I met other people, I had heard of all of these stories of Billy doing that same thing for all of these people in this business. For people like Patina Miller, and Leslie Odom, and so by the time Billy won his Tony Award, when he got up there to get that Tony for Kinky Boots, there was a collective yell all over New York City as everybody was watching on their television screens, watching the Tony Awards on CBS. Everybody was jumping up and down, off their sofas, because we knew he deserved that.
Oh, he absolutely did. I actually have to go back for a moment, and then we had mentioned Miss Saigon and what an impact it's had on both of our careers and aspiring to be musical theater actors. I know that you have a very close relationship with Lea Salonga.
Yeah.
I need to take this moment to say hello, and you have inspired me more than you could even put into words. So I just want you to tell me a little bit about the relationship with her, because you've worked together in Flower Drum Song, and then also recently in Allegiance.
Yeah, so Lea, I met on my very first Broadway show. She was the above the title star of Flower Drum Song. By that point, she already won a Tony Award for Miss Saigon. She was already the voice of Princess Jasmine and Mulan for the Disney films. So she was already this big Broadway star. And I remember at 21, 22, when I made my Broadway debut, Lea was somebody I looked up to. I mean, we all looked up to her, but working so closely with her, she really became a big sister for everybody in that company. There were so many people my age making their Broadway debuts on Flower Drum Song, and so she kind of took us all under her wing and became our Broadway big sister. So it was serendipitous and kind of cosmic and wonderful that we would eventually then get to play brother and sister in Allegiance, a show that Lea and I started developing, in 2009. We started doing that show together, and along with George Takei.
Yes.
And it was really inspired by George Takei's own upbringing and his real life experience that he had with his family when he was 5 years old, and the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened, and he and his family, along with 120,000 other Japanese Americans, were forced to leave their homes along the West Coast and were placed in these internment camps because they were thought to be a threat to national security simply because of the color of their skin or their heritage. It was a blatant, egregious, wrongdoing by our country, a big mistake. our country.
What an important musical and a story that needs to be told. And we have this amazing footage of you in a very key moment in the show when you sing What Makes a Man. And I also wanted to just have the audience think about this moment where, as a performer, if you can explain, of course, we love to be with the ensemble and tell this story, but what about that moment when you're just on stage alone? Yeah, and it's yours. You're telling this story, and it's you and the audience. Can you tell us behind that from your perspective?
The amazing part of working on Allegiance, besides working with incredible artists like Leung and George Takei, what was really great about it is I was really part of the development from 2009, the very first reading in New York City, all the way until, taking the show out of town in 2012 to the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, and then taking it to Broadway. Many readings and workshops and developmental phases had to happen between 2009 and 2015 that we premiered it on Broadway. So it was being a part of that creative process. There was a lot of script changes and songs being written and songs being cut. But what was so cool was working with the writers and working with the creators and working with people like George, where songs get written for you. And so, that song, What Makes a Man, actually was not a song that existed. It wasn't a song that existed in the very first reading. It wasn't a song that was in the workshop. It wasn't even a song that was in our out-of-town tryout in San Diego. They wrote that song after we came back from San Diego.
I'll do what it takes. I must be mine.
Okay, so we have been discussing your career, and there have been quite a few advancements in terms of roles available for Asian Americans, with the advancement of Allegiance and other shows, but you also have been part of colorblind casting.
Yeah.
And I love that, Lea Salonga, was in Les Mis, and she really started to push the envelope with that. But this right here, we are talking to the original Buck in the Chicago company of Wicked, another little known show that's struggling. I'm kidding. And how was that? And what did you have to? What walls did you have to bust down to say, look at me for the character as opposed to just my ethnicity?
Well, it's so interesting. When Wicked first came out, I never even thought that I could play Buck. The original Buck, Chris Fitzgerald, was Caucasian.
Yes.
So it wasn't even a role that I even thought, I could play that one day. And also, I remember going to opening night of Wicked on Broadway, actually. And believe it or not, opening night of Wicked on Broadway, there were empty seats. Nobody knew that Wicked at the time was going to be this huge, gigantic hit, and it really struck a chord, especially with young girls. That friendship between Elphaba and Glinda really struck a chord with a whole generation of theater lovers. And so I remember, watching the show, and I remember also going to the opening night party. And at the time, my agent, who's still my agent today, was Kristen Chenoweth's agent. And he said to me, he was like, I can see you playing that role one day. And I said, really? I can't see that, but okay. I didn't see it because the role was originated by a Caucasian person.
Yes.
So a year down the line, they were auditioning for the first national tour. Now, this was going to be only the second company of this big hit show on Broadway that had then, won all of these Tony Awards, especially for Idina Menzel, that kind of, catapulted her career. And so I went to audition for the first national. And when you go to a big final callback for a Broadway show, it's quite an intimidating experience. It's you, and then behind the table is every producer and creator and book writer and director and choreographer, and the one friendly face I had behind the table was Stephen Schwartz, who I had actually met at Carnegie Mellon University. He would always come back every year and teach a master class, and I'd met him before and sung for him before, and he was actually the one that kind of broke the ice for me in the room,
And sometimes you just need that with a final callback. No matter what anyone says, I have my health, I'm happy, I'm grateful. You know what? When you get that close, you can smell it, you can taste it, you want it, and sometimes just to see one friendly face behind the table, just giving you a little kindness, can make all the difference in the world.
It really does.
And that was
really Stephen Schwartz, and he's always been that for me, But I remember doing this audition, leaving, and then not getting the job, and feeling disappointed. Well, 3 or 4 months down the line, I get this random phone call that says, hey, by the way, remember when you auditioned for the first national of Wicked and you didn't hear anything and you thought you didn't get the job? Actually, you didn't get that job, but you were on a list to get this next job. They're going to open a whole Chicago company of this show. And they'd like you to originate the role of Bach. And I said, well, that's amazing. Now, you know, and talking to the creators of Wicked, you know, they're like, listen, it's Oz. Who's to say that Wickies and Munchkins and witches can't be Asian, Latino, you know, African American? Like they can be anything. It's Oz. It's open ended. You know, and it's the same thing. You know, now I'm doing Aladdin on Broadway, and it's Agrabah. Well, Agrabah doesn't really exist in the world. It's a fictitious place. And so the wonderful folks at Disney, you know, have always been so wonderful about colorblind casting all of their shows. So here we are in Agrabah, and Agrabah is the most ethnically diverse place ever. And I think in the theater, you know, we suspend the disbelief anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like we look at a set, you know, and we go, we know that that's not a real tree. We know that's a painted set. Do you know what I mean? We know that Elphaba's not really flying.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? We know that, you know, Aladdin and Jasmine aren't really flying on the magic carpet, and it's theater magic. And we use our imaginations. And I think in the theater, we have that possibility to kind of break down people's conceptions. You know, even my own. I couldn't really see myself in the role. It took, again, wonderful mentors and wonderful people around me that said, no, you can do it.
But what's so amazing about this is the next generation, those young kids that are looking up right now and that are Asian Americans, Latinos, African Americans, say, you know what, I can do that role because of moments like this. So there really is something that is quite admirable. Before I get to Aladdin, which please, I want to talk about a lot of Aladdin, I have to just say the moment that Telly had said yes to this interview, and then I was going through his career and his footage. He has been so wonderful to work with. I can't say that enough, and I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse. But there's been one thing that's been tough with Telly, and that is getting through a song without busting out into tears. No, and so the true moment I have to explain is he says yes to me, so I get the email. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get this going. Boom, boom, boom. Who can I get my hair, my makeup, my crew, my this, and then it just played in the background off of my laptop. Him singing in Rent.
Oh my gosh.
And here goes, I'm already gonna lose it again. And so I hear Telly singing, and I literally just am at my kitchen table like, just have this moment of this is happening. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Rent.
Yeah.
I know that you were in the last company of the Broadway run, which is a historic run, and then played the role of Angel on the Broadway National Tour, and then got to do it with Neil Patrick Harris at the Hollywood Bowl. Tell me about just to even step in those shoes.
Well, you know, first of all, Rent was at 16 years old. You know,
yes.
That was this generation has Hamilton. The generation maybe before that had Spring Awakening and Wicked.
Yes.
I mean, those were the shows that like defined a generation. For our generation, it was Rent, for sure. I mean, I remembered, you know, they would always joke about how, you know, well, you can always tell where the music theater kids are on Carnegie Mellon campus because they're singing Rent at the top of their lungs.
Full belt.
In the UC, you know
yes.
what I mean? Like, so it's, you know, so that was, I mean, people used to joke about it, how much we were obsessed with that show. And for me, growing up in New York, you know, I saw Rent, the only way I could see Rent was the lottery, was the Rent lottery. For $20, you could sit in the first 2 rows of the Neiman Theater. And I remember, you know, sleeping with the bums on 41st Street and getting my $20 ticket to Rent and a rush ticket, and then and sitting there and, you know, that moment in the show, the moment that I would eventually end up singing Will I, was the first time I ever actually cried in the theater. I had this moment where the music of that, and what, you know, and it's a testament to Jonathan Larson and kind of the passion and his commitment to telling the story about his friends that he lost before tragically losing his own life. You know, you know, he wrote this beautiful, you know, he wrote this short little 16 bar refrain, and that was in a round.
Can't get through it. And without losing it.
And I, you know, listen, Rent dealt with so many mature themes, and at 16, you know, I didn't really know everything that was happening. I just knew that this music moved me to tears, and I didn't know why. And so it was really, really moving when 10 years later, I would get to join that company in 2006 and then see that show to the end of its run on Broadway. And then, then I joined there was a big tour called the Broadway Tour, where Anthony Rapp and Adam Pascal went on the road with Gwen Stewart, another original cast member, and then many of us from the final Broadway company joined them on this tour. It went all over the country, and it went to Tokyo, Japan, and we went to Seoul, Korea, and it was a wonderful way to like bring that magical experience of closing night on Broadway to all of the rent heads all over the country and all over the world. And then surprisingly, I get a phone call that says, hey, would you like to come and play Angel at the Hollywood Bowl, directed by Neil Patrick Harris? And it was what Neil brilliantly did, because we had such a short rehearsal period, was that he said, I'm gonna pair up these Hollywood celebrities that have never done Rent, that are phenomenally talented, Vanessa Hudgens and Nicole Scherzinger and Wayne Brady, but I'm gonna pair them with Rent alums, people in the Rent family that have done the show, that really know the show, to like help them along this very short 10-day rehearsal period to put up Rent at the Hollywood Bowl for 12,000 people a night. You know what I mean? So here we were. So I got paired up. I got to play Angel with Wayne Brady, who is so sweet and so wonderful, and that, I think that was the show that really, where Wayne got bit by the music theater bug.
Well, that man can sing.
Because since then he's gone off and done Kinky Boots. I saw him be brilliant in Kinky Boots.
Yes.
And then he was in the Chicago company of Hamilton.
Yes.
For a little while. I mean, he's
extremely gifted. I also want to bring a highlight and a focus and a spotlight to your television career that has also been blossoming as well. You were a cast member, I know you had a stint on GLEE.
Yeah.
A little known show that we're kind of familiar with, right? You were a warbler. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the crazy thing about GLEE was, this was the second season of the show. And it was just one of those random phone calls from my agent.
This man and his phone calls, okay? Can I get like one of these? Unbelievable. It's like I'm just walking down the street, phone call, and Hollywood.
Well, the phone call was to say, hey, listen, can you put yourself on tape for this new character that they're creating called Blaine, right? Which eventually would go to Darren Criss, another phenomenally talented Asian actor. He's half Filipino, who's like breaking down barriers, right? And he when I didn't get that job, it was like, well, you're not going to get that job, but they did love your tape, and this character Blaine is flanked by all of these boys in a prep school that all sing a cappella, loosely based on the Tufts Beelzebubs and loosely based on the Yale Wolf and Hoops, who are very famous collegiate a cappella groups. And they said, would you come and do this? It's probably going to be like 2 episodes. We're going to introduce the character, and then you'll be done. And I said, how cool is that? That we're going to get to go on. Well, I remember hearing that first debut of the Warblers was an a cappella version of Katy Perry's Teenage Dream. And I thought, what a cool arrangement. And then it kind of exploded from there. It just hit a nerve with respect. I don't know, it really spoke to a lot of teens who were struggling with coming out, or they were struggling with finding their own identities or not fitting in. And here were these 2 teenage boys having this beautiful gay relationship on primetime television, which was kind of groundbreaking at the time. And it gave all of these kids who were afraid to come out and afraid to identify with who they were, it gave them a platform and a place to feel courageous, and I don't know, I have to really give a shout out to the creators of GLEE, and they really they knew that they had this national platform, they knew that they had this show that really struck a chord with people, and they used their powers for good in a lot of ways. They advocated for those kids that didn't always feel like they fit in, but that they found, with music, they found a way to fit in that choir room together. And I think that was the magic of that show, and that's why so many people love that show, because we've all felt that moment where we've not fit in.
Absolutely. Oh, and for young kids, just as he said, to take a look and to watch that and to know that it's okay, and that's another thing that Telly's been a part of. Also, I have to just throw out, in addition to his work on GLEE and several other shows, was that you literally kind of hit the holy grail for every actor in New York. You had a moment on Law and Order. I love it. love it. So you played a police officer, right?
I did, yeah. You know, it's so funny. Like, if you're an actor in New York City, you know, there's this running joke that says you're not really an actor in New York until you book your first Law and Order.
It's the truth.
And so you know, it was. I remember we shot this late at night in Bodega, somewhere in the Bronx, I think. And then it was on a Saturday. It was on a Friday night, and then I remembered like shooting all night and then going the next day to do my matinee at Rent. Is what I did. Like, I remember it was such a crazy experience. But yeah.
And you did some great physical work in that scene too. Did they?
Yeah.
How much choreography did they set up for you in that?
Not really very much.
Like,
you
you
know.
just beat his butt and keep it rolling.
You know, that's the big difference, I guess, with television and with theater. You know, theater, we rehearse something for hours and hours and hours so that we can recreate it 8 times a week. Well, with television, you know, and even on GLEE too, they sometimes wouldn't choreograph a number until you got to the set, and then they would choreograph an 8 count here, another 16 counts there. You know, they would figure it out on location.
Yes.
You know, and so on location, we kind of figured out how to do this fight that you're about to see on Law and Order.
I love it. It with Law and Order, it really is a rite of passage for every actor, and I just have to say that I was brought in for that show a few times, and I had some final callbacks too, and it never worked out. So I just want to take my moment, and it would be on the hospital bed, and I want to have the black eye there. Just kidding. Thank you. I created my own moment, my own.
Yeah.
No, I made it.
I cast you.
Tell the
I
cast
cast
me,
you.
boom.
Dick Wolf.
Anyway, I had to take that moment. This man not only is Aladdin, which we're going to speak about, he also is a recording artist and has really doing some incredible things in taking classic songs, in addition to writing his own, but taking some classic songs and putting his own spin on it, either giving it a little bit of funky R&B or just a different approach. And even though these songs are so steeped in history and we've heard quite a few times, it gives you a different perspective and actually hits you in a different way. So tell me a little bit about your album that you got.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting. You know, I've had the blessing of working on Broadway pretty consistently, but you know, Broadway actors don't work all the time.
True.
And so I found that, you know, in between gigs, I felt like I had more to say as an artist and as a singer. And so I started doing a lot more cabaret. And I met some of the incredible musicians that I've worked with, you know, in Broadway orchestras and pits and all that.
He's really in his element when he's doing. I mean, it's something to behold. You've got to see this.
We decided to kind of play jazz clubs and play cabaret clubs in New York City, and then we started playing them all over the country. And eventually we said, you know, all of these people that come see you sing in clubs, they don't have anything to take home. What if they wanted to relive some of the musical collaborations that we created in the studio? You know, what if people wanted to take something home? And my drummer, Michael Kreuter, he has a record label called the Yellow Sound label. And he's also happens to be Cheetah Rivera's musical director.
Uh-huh.
So Cheetah is on the label, and people like Chris Jackson are on the label, and Alan Cumming is on the label. And he said, why don't we produce an album on my label? And I was like, oh my gosh, what an incredible honor. I never thought that I would be able to do that.
Yes.
We did. We kind of took all of those great things, and I have such a wonderful group of musicians. Michael Kreuter, Miriam McSweeney, who's one of the best jazz bassists in the city, Gary Adler, who's my musical director, who you know, he co-wrote Altar Boys, the off-Broadway hit Altar Boys, but then he was also the musical director on Avenue Q on Broadway for the entire 6-7 year run that was on Broadway, and he's also music directed at the Radio City Music Hall, the Christmas Spectacular. He's phenomenal. The four of us get in a room and we take songs that we love, you know, songs like New York State of Mind or Leaving on a Jet Plane or How Will I Know, and then we recreate them and we put a spin on them.
Well, I know Whitney Houston is a massive influence in your life, and you cover How Will I Know. You said
we cover How Will I Know, and we also in GLEE fashion we also do a really cool mashup of I Am What I Am from La Cage aux Folles with Whitney Houston's I Have Nothing. So and that was, you know, we often do that in concert, and you know, and now with those albums, and now we really enjoy playing all the time, and actually I have a great concert date that's coming up in December at a brand new concert venue called the Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut. It's an old movie house that's kind of been abandoned and deserted, and the city of Norwalk and some amazing people have decided to come in and create a new venue there. I'll be playing there in December. Some other great artists will be playing there too. Betty Buckley is supposed to play that concert venue soon, and Mandy Gonzalez is going to be there as well. So I'm getting the band together, and I'm going to be in Norwalk, Connecticut in December at the Wall Street Theater. So if you want to find out, just go to my website, tellyleung.com, and you'll find the dates.
And we'll make sure to have that on our website as well at stylewithden.com. Check that out. It's going to sell out. This man, when he is just simplified, just put with that mic and sings, it really is something special. So you got to check that out. Okay, now I need to get to the biggie, Aladdin. On Broadway, as we speak. If I cut the camera right now, hopped into a cab, and went to 42nd Street, I'd see this man's face on the marquee, okay? You just started your run, correct?
I did. I've been in the show now for about 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
And I have to say, it is one of the most fun roles I've ever had to tackle. You know, I get to live out my Disney dreams, and I get to, you know, I grew up on that film. You know, when the film came out in '92, it was one of those films that I had the VHS, and I would pop it in, and we'd watch it over and over again, along with Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. You know, and I remember, I did an event with Alan Menken a couple of weeks ago, and I remember meeting him for the very first time, and I was really starstruck, because that man was the soundtrack of our lives.
Absolutely.
You know, not just those Disney films, but also Little Shop of Horrors too. You know what I mean? And Newsies and Hercules. I mean, it's insane. With the contribution he's given to all of us musically. And so getting to play Aladdin 8 times a week is my 12-year-old dream come true.
Oh my goodness! Well, speaking of Disney dreams, at Stylewithden right now, we gotta roll with it. I have a Disney dream as well, and I know it's a Monday, and I wouldn't put this man on the spot too much, but I need, if you could dig down deep, and I will show you the world, just a little hair of it, and I'll have a Jasmine.
Just
a second, and it's on tape, right? We're paying for this. I need it on camera. All right, if you would.
I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, princess, now when did you last let your heart decide?
Done. Yes! I needed it. I'm gonna take advantage of my moment, and
oh my gosh.
You're amazing.
It's so fun.
So tell me about the physical stamina to do this, because I saw the show. Which you have to, it's unbelievable, and I will not give away, we know what happens in Aladdin, obviously, but there are some production numbers that I am telling you are spectacular, out of this world. I mean, even just simple things as hitting the mark, just these moments where the actor has to be right where he needs to be at that moment, or someone's gonna get hurt. It's unbelievable. So physically, I know you have this section in the show where you're just bam, 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 I'm so proud of your boy.
Well, once Aladdin gets introduced at the top of the show, he really doesn't stop, and it's, I have to say, I definitely, I called up some of my friends who've played Aladdin, either here on Broadway, also I have friends in the West End who've done the role too.
Yes.
And so I called them and I said, hey guys, any words of advice? And they said, well, get in shape, eat right, and do some cardio, because you're gonna feel like you're shot out of a cannon, and you don't want to be winded doing this show. And that was some phenomenal advice that I got from those friends, from those amazing Aladdins that have come before me, because it is a beast of a role as far as stamina goes.
Absolutely.
And it's not so much vocal stamina as it is physical stamina, and just making sure that you are, Aladdin is an agile. He's a thief, he's quick, and he's skilled and he's nimble, and you have to have that kind of physical energy. Casey Nicholaw, who's the director of the show, always says that Aladdin is one of those characters. His weight, he's always on the balls of his feet. That's always where he is. He's ready to jump at any minute. And believe me, in Aladdin on Broadway, Aladdin does quite a lot of jumping around. So for 2.5 hours. So it is quite physical. And you know, by the time I get home at the end of a night, especially at the end of a 2-show day, I sleep really, really well.
Oh, I bet. Out cold.
I'm out cold.
For when you get to Proud of Your Boy, haven't you already had so much has happened to you, right?
Yeah.
There's this moment. I mean, I would be gasping for you in the corner with my asthma inhaler, and this one's belting for the gods. How do you even pull that off?
Well, you know what's interesting? Adam Jacobs, who was the original Aladdin on Broadway, gave me some very good advice. He says, you know, after one jump ahead, which is kind of the big number where Aladdin is jumping all over the marketplace and jumping off buildings and jumping through hoops and inside buildings and climbing, you know, he says there's one short scene right before Proud of Your Boy that launches into the song. Make sure you get some really good deep breaths in that scene. And he was totally right. That is your one chance to breathe. So take it, you know, and you start to do that, you know, as a dancer, you know this too, that you have to start finding those places where you can go, okay, I have to breathe here, or I'm not going to make it to the end of the song.
I mean, and that's one thing that we make it look easy, and you go there and you want to just get lost in the show, but actors and musical theater actors are athletes, and it's so interesting to hear that, because I know if I got to Proud of Your Boy, forget it. I'll be proud of my going to sleep, proud of my send me to the doctor's office, proud of my it ain't happening. It's incredible. And you're in the show. You're going to be there. We're going to see you for a minute.
I'm in the show at least till February of next year. So I hope everybody comes down to the New Amsterdam Theater and comes visit us in Agrabah. We're having a really good time. So and I know that you'll have a really good time if you come see the show.
You have to check it out.
It's a phenomenal company of actors, and you know, so much of the original company on Broadway has remained with the show, which is kind of rare for a Broadway show. You know, so Courtney Reed, the original Jasmine, is still there, and the person that is kind of royalty in the building. Jonathan Freeman, who was not only the original Jafar on Broadway, but he is the original voice of Jafar from the 1992 film. He is playing Jafar on Broadway right now, and it's that's one of those pinch me moments when you're on stage with Jonathan, and and he says all of those famous Jafar lines when he's like Prince Abu, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's actually Jafar from the movie. You know what I mean? It's wild. It's wild.
Unbelievable. So please go down, do yourself a favor, and
come see us in Aladdin.
It's incredible. I knew this was going to be a lot of work, and it was going to pay off, and I'm so excited as this episode comes to a close, because I'm going to be riding this high for quite some time. To have this man here and to share his career with us and his time, I really am having a hard time finding the words, and I don't have a hard time finding words very often.
Well, this was Dennis. This was so fun, and I was actually, because I'm so not fashion smart, and I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I'm normally in dance clothes all the time. I was nervous about coming here today and be like, oh my gosh, like, what am I gonna wear today? But actually, it was so fun playing dress up with you today. It was super fun, and I can't wait to see all those pictures, the pictures that we got, and thank you for broadening my fashion sense today and making me a little more courageous when I go shopping next time.
Absolutely, and I just know the feedback when we have our professional shots finished with Telly. He looks like $1 million. He looks like the star that he is. So thank you for that.
Thank you,
take
Dennis.
that one and run. Thank you again, everyone, for coming today. This has been quite a pleasure, and I've got a lot more in store for you. We are just getting going. I promised you icons, I'm giving you that. I promised you stars, and I'm giving you that. And I've got so much more up my sleeve, it's scary. So I want to just finish by saying what I say to my students in my teaching days, is that push aside any of those moments that you feel any fear or a voice in your head that's telling you can't do it. I have it too. I still have it. I had to get up this morning and say, no, you put that dance suit on and you go there and you get it done. So you push that aside, get out of your comfort zone, put a little bit of color. Even if you're going to grab some milk and you're going down that corner store, put some oomph in it, put some thought in how you look. It'll emit in every other facet of your life. So thank you. We're coming at you again very, very soon. And thank you again to Telly. Oh, also, tell us your Twitter. Tell us your Instagram. How can we find you and stay up to date with every moment?
Yeah, you can absolutely find me on my website, which is www.tellyleung.com. And find me on Twitter and Instagram @tellyleung. See you there.
He does an amazing job of keeping you up to date on what's going on, so please follow him, okay? And we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.